In this video, we're going to create this rough animation using the applications Maya and Adobe After Effects. The first part of our process will take place inside of Maya, animating our planet and then generating a movie file that we can edit inside of Adobe After Effects. So I've got my planet selected, I've got the texture on it, and what I want to do now is I want to animate it, put in the light, and then put in a plane in the back which is green that we can edit inside of After Effects. So let's start with the animation process. I'll select my planet and I'll delete the history and freeze the transforms. In my channel box you can see now that everything is zeroed out with the exception of the scale. Now we need to address the timeline which appears down below. And in the timeline you'll see these series of numbers on kind of a rule, and in the lower left hand corner you may see the number 1. This is where our animation would begin. I'm going to make sure it says 1, and then if I were to go to the other side of the application, I'll say a corresponding box as well, and I want that one to be 200. Now if we take a look further at the timeline, you'll see in the lower right hand corner a VCR control, a box which tells me where my playback head is. I happen to be at frame 153. If I was to click, say, at 185, you can see now it's reflected. We can also just drag back and forth to get to frames. The playback will be done with this little VCR control, this little white triangle pointing to the right. Now, in order to introduce keyframes, we also need to make sure that this box with these hooked arrows is clicked on and has a red background. We also need to click on the little orange guy with the gear, and that will give us the preferences. And in the preferences, time slider will usually be selected. If not, just click on it, and you want to make sure the playback speed is set for 24 frames times 1. I'll click on Save. Now with those settings, we can go ahead and we can animate the planet. I'll make sure my playback head is at frame 1. I can drag it manually. And then I'm going to go over to the channel box, and for Rotate Y, I'm going to right-click and choose Key Select. Now I'll put my playback head at the end of the timeline, dragging to frame 200, or punching in 200 at the bottom, and I'm going to make Rotate Y 360. So now if I were to click on the little white triangle pointing to the right, you'll see that your planet starts to rotate. If we look closely, you'll see that the planet slows down and speeds up, and if I wanted to loop this inside of After Effects for longer than the 200 frames, it would look like it was kind of slowing down and speeding up, and I want it to be consistent. So I'll stop the movie by clicking on that same triangle. It'll turn into a white triangle when it is off, a red box when it's playing. I'm going to go to Windows, and I'm going to go to the Animation Editor, and I'm going to choose Graph Editor. And you'll see the Graph Editor pop up. Now make sure that you've stretched out the Graph Editor so you see a series of tools here below the word Graph Editor. You'll see this green S, and if I was to marquee select it pretty broadly, I've selected both the key frames and the representation of that line which denotes it being faster and slower in different points. Now I'm going to zoom in here, and if I was to click on this orange line with the single key frame, you'll see it straighten the line out. And that will make my planet rotate consistently from beginning to end. Next, we'll go ahead and we'll put a light in. So I will go to Create and Lights, and I'll put my spotlight in. I'm going to hit 4 on the keyboard because I know that my light has been dropped right in the center. Now I'll adjust the light so it's reflecting off of planet. If I were to hit T on the keyboard, I get the target plus the source. I'll hold X and click and drag that to the center of the viewport. I'll go to the attributes. In the attributes, I'm going to make the intensity only 4. I'll increase the cone angle to about 150, and the penumbra angle I'll max out to 10. And the reason that we won't need bright lights is because we're going to be rendering out roughs. We're not using Arnold for this. If we were to use Arnold, it would be 200 frames, which would take quite a bit of time. This is the approach it would take if you were bringing a rough to a client. Now if I was to go to lighting and choose use all lights, you can see the planet is pretty well lit. So I'll adjust the light at the angle I want and I'll save it. Next we're going to put in a flat green plane for the background so we can key that out in After Effects. Going to the orthographic view, I'll hold my space bar, I'll go to Create, Polygon, Primitives, Plane, and I'm going to drag a very large plane. I'll return to my perspective view and I'll hit W on the keyboard and I'll move that back. The further I move it back, the less of a shadow I'm going to see on here. I'm also going to go into the view in which I introduced this. I'll zoom back a little bit and I'll make it larger. And that's just going to give us some room to play around with this as we kind of zoom in and rotate the viewport. I'm going to make that plane a green. I'll right click and choose Assign New Material. The usual Arnold AI standard is fine. And then over in the attributes, I'll click on the Color tab under Base and choose the default green. I'll then go ahead and reduce the specular weight to 0 so we have no reflection. So if I was to get in close on my planet now, hitting it, I can now see that I have a solid green background. There's a couple of things we have to do though. If I was to render this right now, I would get the grid, I would get the cube, I would get the word perspective or the truncated perspective, and then I would get the axes. We need to eliminate them and hide them to make the video. I'll start by hiding the grid. Inside the viewport, you'll see just below the word panels, that little grid shape. I'll click on it and it turns it off. Now we need to turn off the cube in the right corner, the perspective word, and then the axes in the lower left. I'm going to go to Display, Heads Up Display, and I'm going to click on Camera Name, and you'll see the word perspective has just gone away. Once again, Display, Heads Up, and you'll see View Cube. That's the cube in the corner. That's now gone. And then I'll go to Display, Heads Up Display, and I'm going to remove the view axes. The last thing I need to do now is hide the light source here. That icon inside the viewport, I'll go to Show, Viewport, and down towards the bottom you'll see lights. We have to be careful now when we render the movie in Playblast because if something is selected, like the sphere, we'll get the lines that define the faces. So I'll click on my outliner to deselect everything. Now we're ready to render our Playblast movies. I'll go to Window and Playblast Attributes. We're going to choose Start and End for the frames, and I've set it from 1 through 200. H.264. Scale 100%, and then make sure that you've chosen for the display size from the render settings. That will give us the aspect ratio we've been working with all semester. Clicking on Apply, it'll render out that movie that we've just defined. I'll go to File, Save As, and I'll name it appropriately and put it in my folder. Now we need to render a close-up. So I'll hold my Option key down and drag and then pull down. And all I have to do now is go to Windows and click on Playblast. The settings are the same. And the settings are the same for this, so all I need to do is click on Playblast. I'll then return to File, Save. Next, we'll bring these files into After Effects and drop out the backgrounds and put in the stars.